Teresa?
Ready.
I'd like to call to order the Sparks City Council meeting of Monday, February 8, 2016, with a roll call, please.
Mayor Martini?
Here.
Council members Ratty?
Here.
Lawson?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Bybee?
Here.
Schmidt? Absent, but in the building.
In the building.
City Manager Driscoll?
Here.
City Attorney Adams?
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, invocation. If you'd all stand for the invocation, we have the president of the University Society of Hinduism. Go ahead, Rajan.
I am.
Okay, I will be reading from ancient Hindu scriptures like 1500 BCE. Om Bhurvubah Swaha Tat Savitr Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodhyat. We meditate on the transcendental glory of the Deity Supreme, who is inside the heart of the earth, inside the life of the sky, and inside the soul of the heaven. May He stimulate and illuminate our minds. Astoma Satgamya Tamsoma Jyotirgamya Mrityormamratam Gamya. Lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness to light, lead us from death to immortality. Niyatam Kuru Karma Tvam Karma Jaya Karmana Srira Yatra Pi Chatena Prasiddhiyet Karmana Yagnarthat Karmanao Nyatra Lokoyam Karma Bandhana Dartham Karma Kauntaya Mukta Sang Samachara. Fulfill all your duties. Action is better than inaction. Even to maintain your body, you are obliged to act. Selfish action imprisons the world. Act selflessly without any thought of personal profit. Om Saha Navatu Saha Napunaktu Saha Viryan Karva Bahai Tejasvi Navaditam Astu Ma Vidvisa Bahai. May we be protected together, may we be nourished together, may we work together with great vigor, may our study be enlightening, may no obstacle arise between us. Samniva Akuti Samana Hridyaniva Samnavastuvo Manu Yathava Susa Asti. United your resolve, united your hearts, may your spirits be at one, that you may long together dwell in unity and concord. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Rajan. Appreciate it. If all remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, please, Mr. What's his name? Lawson, would you lead us?
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Next is public comment. If you want to speak under public comment, please fill out one of these cards. I have one speaker, and it's Mr. Ron Bro, and thank you for giving me the box here so I could pronounce your name correctly. Thank you.
You wouldn't be the first one, sir.
Okay, Mr. Bro. You'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to bring your attention to traffic issues that have been ongoing for 25-plus years in my neighborhood. My address is 5305 Santa Barbara in Sparks, off of Los Altos Parkway. I'd like to talk about the traffic on Los Altos Parkway between Vista Boulevard and Orinda. I walk my dogs there 4 or 5 times a day, easily. Met a lot of people out there, and everybody, even at my homeowners association, has the same issues: speeders and the stop sign violations there. I would estimate that in any 30-minute period at the intersection of Los Altos and Santa Barbara, there are 5 vehicles that enter that intersection at over 10 miles an hour. I estimate the same amount of people are talking on their cell phones, and if you're aware, NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, equates talking on your cell phone to being intoxicated, 0.08 level blood alcohol level. If you walk up to Los Altos and Orinda, I would estimate that in any hour, there are at least 5 vehicles at 15 over the posted speed limit, at least. The incident that prompted me to come here today happened on December 23rd, about 8 o'clock at night. I was walking out there. I heard a car come off Los Parkway in the channel, right turn. The vehicle was accelerating and turning so quickly, the tires broke traction, chirped a little bit. I stepped back away from the intersection. By the time it hit the intersection, it was doing 70 miles an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, I am certified to visually estimate speed in the state for the court system. So I'm not exaggerating anything. That was my professional estimate. The second part of this issue is how do we get the Sparks Police Department to enforce traffic laws up there? I have tried to take care of this at the lowest possible level, starting with my homeowners association. After 20 years, the board at my homeowners association is as frustrated as I am. I've called the Sparks Police Department in the last few years 3 times. Each time I was told that my concerns would be forwarded to the patrol division. There was no increased patrol activity that I saw. I stopped 3 police officers, 2 of which were obviously on calls, just you could tell by their demeanor. The third person, which is a little disturbing, said, and I quote, "Sir, I'm a crime car. I'm not allowed to make traffic stops." I wasn't aware the Sparks Police Department could have enough people to do that. But they did. I've seen 2 police officers parked at the intersection of Los Altos and Santa Barbara. Stopped to talk to them to find out what they were doing. Both of them said they were amazed at the amount of violations at the stop sign. Both said they could not stop cars that day because they were just there to, this is a quote also, to meter the intersection. Whatever happened to that information they gathered, metering the intersection, I don't know. Because, again, nothing. I'm not asking for a police officer out there 30, 40 hours a week. That would be unreasonable. I'm asking for an officer to be out there 2 to 3 hours a week at random times. That would stop the majority of these problems within a few months. I'm sure it would. And I would ask whoever has the authority in this board to ask the Sparks Police Department to provide statistics for the 3 months preceding today, starting today for the 3 months, just to see the difference between the last 3 months, the preceding 3 months, if you guys feel the need to do this, to call them and ask for extra enforcement so we can compare those numbers and present that information at the first council meeting in May, so we'll have something to talk about. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Bro. Our police chief is here. Our city manager is writing feverishly, so we will look into it. I promise you.
My name and contact information is on that card.
Great.
I don't want to say put it on Facebook, but give it to whoever might need it professionally, and I'd be more than happy to talk to them.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Questions?
I will also follow up on that. I'm your
Right here
councilwoman.
behind me next to the
I'm your councilwoman, so I will make sure we follow up.
Thanks, Mr. Bro. Okay, next is approval of the agenda. Anybody want to take anything out of order? If not, looking for a motion, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Make a motion to approve the agenda as outlined.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Mr. Smith to approve the agenda as outlined by staff. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote or say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, 6, consideration and possible approval of minutes of the regular Sparks City Council meeting of January 25th, 2016. Any omissions, corrections, or deletions? Not looking for a motion. Mr. Schmidt?
Motion to approve.
Second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schmidt. Don't lose concentration here, Ed. You're killing me. Motion by Mr. Schmidt, second by Mr. Lawson to approve the minutes of January 25th, 2016. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote or say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, next is announcements, presentations, recognition items, and items of special interest. Dr. John Novak, if you would come down, please. So this I believe, Mr. Novak came to me asking for something to do. He moved recently from Houston, I think. Is that where you came from, John? I don't remember how long ago it was, but about 8 months ago you came to me, and has it been that long already? Yikes. It does. So he came to me and said, I'm looking for something to do in the city. I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other thing. Well, just happened 2 weeks later, I found something for him to do. So put him on the Board of Health as one of our representatives. He's done a tremendous job, obviously, and he's just gotten a special recognition. Dr. John Novak volunteered and was elected to the National Association of Local Boards of Health Boards of Directors. Thank you for your dedication and service to our city of Sparks. John, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's my honor.
And please say a few words if you wouldn't mind. Thanks.
It's my honor and pleasure to represent the city of Sparks, but more than that, work with the team on the Washoe County Health Board. We have an amazingly good team and going in the right direction. Got a few challenges like the city, sits and looks at all the time. We've got about the same thing. We got a few little money issues to go, but it's been quite an experience, and the opportunity to move on to a national level is really quite a good thing too. So we've got a lot of good things going for us. I plan on continuing.
Well, good for you, and it looks good for the city of Sparks too that we should elect people like yourself to do these kind of boards and commissions. And your counterpart, Ms. Ratty's on the phone, so.
Hey, she's there. Her phone, and she sits by me all the time, so it's really good.
Great.
Good working relationship.
Okay, comments? Yes.
May I say something?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to commend John, or Mr. Novak has been a fabulous addition to the Board of Health. He is probably always the person at the meeting who is the most prepared, who's asked the most questions, really just very dedicated in his service to the city, but frankly to the greater county. So I just wanted to personally thank him and just say what a great addition he's been.
Well, thanks for that, Julia. And you know I wouldn't make any bad recommendations for people to sit on boards, right?
I'll reserve comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
All right, Dr. Novak, thank you so much. We appreciate all your work.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to consent items, 8-1 through 8-3. Everybody want to pull a consent item? If not, looking for a motion. Ms. Bybee.
Move to approve the consent items 8.1 through 8.3.
Mr. Lawson.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bybee, seconded by Mr. Lawson to approve consent items 8-1 through 8-3. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote or say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, let's move on to general business, consideration and possible approval of funding allocations recommended by the Tourism and Marketing Committee for 2016 special events. Mr. Mayberry.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Council, Mr. Crystal, Mr. Adams. I'm Adam Mayberry, I'm Communications Manager with item 9.1 is consideration of possible approval of funding allocations recommended by the city's Tourism and Marketing Committee. As you know, Councilman Ron Schmidt is the chair of the city's Tour Marketing Committee. Councilman Ron Schmidt also serves on that committee along with Randy Kennedy, who's in the audience, representing the Nevada Resort Association. The committee met on January 12th and 13th to review the 2016 special event calendar for the year 2016. There's a number of special events that the Tour Mark recommended to support, along with the brand leadership team.
Good list.
Annual
Good list.
$3,950. You know, the city receives annual allocation for tax revenue from the RCA that will be used for tourism marketing purposes. If you have any questions on this, Parks Recreation Director and staff are in the chambers this afternoon. Other than that, that was my remarks, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Schmidt, any comments? Good, looks like a good list, really.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I want to echo Mr. Adams. Thank you to Mr. Smith, Mr. Kennedy for all the work and everything goes into, and especially our city staff, Cindy. Cindy does a tremendous job in helping us prepare for the meeting, as well as Park and Recs with Tracy and Francine, and working all year long on our special events. It's a great list. I mean, you look at where we were at 8 years ago and where we're at now, despite all of our financial conditions and everything else like that. Some of our events are actually getting 50% more now than they were 5 years ago from this list, so it hasn't been something that's going down. On the flip side, there's some groups that are angry that they don't feel they're getting enough money to go ahead and do it. So we're trying to balance two sides here. I want to bring your attention, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I wouldn't repeat what I've talked about for the last couple of years, that there's big red sitting on the top of the agenda called over budget. We receive $200,000 a year in revenue. $4,000 of that comes right off the top for RSCVA to write us a check. They get paid $4,000 to write us a check, so we get $196,000. And we'll never receive under state law a penny more than that, no matter how well we do in this. So it's a very tough call. And we spent $247,000, of which we've overspent for the last 4 years. We've been burning reserves and things that we've done. We left the fund with $7,000 in it coming on up for fiscal year. Now, we receive $196,000 on July 1st from the RSCVA if we filled the rooms up and things, but that money's all dedicated to go to next year. So as you can see, we've got a major budget crisis coming on up. You can't spend every year without finding either new additional revenue sources or cutting what your expenses are. We're not allowed to deplete the account below zero. And I believe Mr. Lawson said this morning we're not allowed to print money. I didn't know that before, but unless we're the federal government, we're going to print money. So this item will come full, hard, fast in the next 12 months of how we're going to develop special events. Or we're going to continue this path of filling those room nights on up. Our goal is 200 days a year of special events in the city of Sparks. We set that goal 8 years ago, and we're doing, staff is doing a tremendous job in helping that on out. So I thank you, and I also leave that, next year will be crunch time. We got to figure something on out, and I appreciate everybody's support.
Ron, if you want, I'll only charge $2,500 to make out that check for the RSCVA.
We can talk to RSCVA, see if they're willing to do that.
I can fill out a check.
Okay,
Okay, questions, Mr. Lawson.
Can you explain, just for public record, how the money comes to us and what it comes from?
Sure, it's
and why it's limited to the 100.
I don't want to lose our audience because it's usually about a 3-day talk about this about Senate Bill 477 in 1999 that led to a revision in 2003. But it's the 2% room tax for the city of Sparks that generate. We take that money, and the first $196,000 or $200,000 comes to the city of Sparks. Any additional revenue that's generated out of that 2% gets split evenly between the city of Reno and RSCVA. This whole thing came about with the Downtown Events Center in 97 through 99 when the funding was being done. Originally, the funding was going to be only Downtown Reno was going to support their event center. They couldn't make budgets, so they expanded that to the Peppermill Atlantis and at that time the Hilton, and it also expanded to the city of Sparks. So there was a coalition of efforts between the city of Sparks and the Nugget to not lose our 2% money and to keep some of that money in for our special events. The compromise that was worked out was the first $200,000 we get. After that, it goes to Reno and RSCVA to spend.
So the reason why I bring that up is we now have, since I sit on the RSCVA board, roughly $4 to $4.5 million extra for marketing in the $2 room tax. So it may be time to take that cap off and do something legislative. So I want to bring that open for Adam and the mayor for our next legislative session to look at taking that cap out.
And I wasn't going to talk about that, but that is going to be my recommendation as we go into the next year for the legislative as our one BDR draft we have to highly consider, because I believe that times have changed, and we're trying to. We right now spend this year $247,000 in the city of Sparks promoting special events. RSCVA budgeted and spent $250,000. We are on the caliber of spending money at the same level as RSCVA does. We have different criteria, a different way we look at it. They have much bigger pots of money they spend, with the air races and things like that. I'm not going to say which one's right or wrong, but I do think that the city council addressing the issue and what I consider an inequity. It's an inequity, no matter how you look at it, of going back to legislation. The only thing I'm concerned about is, as part of the 2003 legislation in which we readdress this thing, be careful for what you ask for. Once we open it on up, it allows for a whole lot more changes on out there. And if RSCVA will back us up on that and not oppose us, it was a brutal, I remember past Councilman Mr. Kerrigan and I sat in front of RSCVA and the board down in Carson City, and it was a brutal 2 hours. They pretty much beat the city of Sparks up pretty good when we tried to address RSCVA money. So I would say if Reno, Washoe County, or the RSCVA and Sparks looked at this as a positive thing and went down together, I suggest we definitely take a look at it.
Ms. Bybee?
I think there's more of an appetite. Let's just say the mayor of Reno went on record as saying that the RSCVA does not promote enough local events like this. So it may be the right time. Time means everything.
Go ahead.
I just had a question. Either Ron or Adam can answer this. On the brand leadership team, does that include the Ignite Sparks campaign that we're doing?
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bybee. It does not. The Ignite Sparks campaign outreach as part of the comprehensive plan update is entirely separate item than this. The specific items that the tour mark approved for the brand leadership team are primarily advertising. That would be advertising in the airport, for instance, that you say you've probably come through the airport as often as you do. Yeah. It includes also a Google AdWords campaign. We're doing a lot of advertising digitally now. That's the trend. We can measure that. It also includes some signage updates in Victorian squares and posters in the kiosks that you see, and those are outdated, need to be refreshed and updated. There's a small amount that will be allocated to provide some support for the city's mobile app. And then there's our annual contract with RAD Strategies, separate from the comprehensive plan update that they're supporting us on. It's primarily supporting my office with respect to administering the brand image, the social media efforts that we do. That's an $18,000 annual contract. So all in total, that totals about $66,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, looking for a motion. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the list coming from the tourism marketing, and appreciation to everybody who's been involved into it. And I would also add discussion. I have a comment for Mr. Lawson.
We have a second, Mr. Lawson.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Schmidt, second by Mr. Lawson to approve 9.1. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
go ahead.
We started out with $350,000. You see how we whittled that down to $250,000, and there was one application that got tied up in our computer system. And I just my apologies to the Sparks Chamber of Commerce that had an application that did not make it to us. We're going to reconvene next week as a board and listen to their application and determine there. So my apologies, that was not done on purpose.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Please vote or say aye.
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Okay, let's move on. 9.2, possible direction to city manager regarding municipal elections in light of the Public Integrity Alliance versus Tucson. Mr. Thornley.
Fun and games.
As no doubt most of you are aware, the Ninth Circuit recently determined that a hybrid election system used by the city of Tucson, wherein voters of a particular ward of the city voted in the primary, and then the general election is conducted with the electorate at large throughout the city, violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, and struck down that system. That is an issue for us for obvious reasons, but for the sake of the record, is because we use largely an identical system. In Tucson, it is important to note, I think, that they have a partisan electoral scheme where we don't. And procedurally, where that case sits right now is it's going up for an en banc rehearing at the Ninth Circuit, which means instead of being heard by a panel of 3 judges, it's going to be heard again by a panel of 11. It's kind of an intermediate stop on the way to petition for certiorari in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, which may or may not be granted. Nevertheless, the potential exists that this decision will change potentially 2 more times before we have a final answer on whether or not that electoral system runs afoul of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment we don't normally look at when we consider voting rights. We look at the Voting Rights Act, we look at the 15th Amendment, we look at the 19th Amendment. So the Equal Protection Clause is kind of new. Nevertheless, that's what the panel determined. From my view, I think that the possibility exists, of course, that the decision is changed. Generally speaking, broadly speaking, the Constitution tolerates participation restrictions in. Goodness, I was doing it wrong. The Constitution tolerates participation restrictions in primary elections. Typically, where you'd see it is by party. Right? Of course, registered Democrats vote in Democratic primaries and registered Republicans vote in Republican primaries. The distinction being, of course, that regardless, most of the electorate does participate in the primary, whereas in the ward-only system, that's a pretty heavy restriction on who can participate in the primary. I don't think it's necessarily a precise analog in that you still have third parties and independents who are restricted from participating in the primary at all. Nevertheless, that is, I think the broadest overview I can give you in that sense as to where the case sits. Don't really have an answer as to whether or not it's going to shake out as constitutional or not. And so what we're looking for today is whether the council would prefer to stick with the electoral system that we have spelled out in the charter, which is primary by ward and then an at-large general election, or if the council's preference is to default to the state law requirement that goes at-large in the primary and at-large in the general. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Smith? Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. What does LCB said on this thing?
I am not aware of an LCB opinion on this matter. As it relates to special law cities, there are 12 in Nevada. Only Reno and Sparks use this hybrid system.
They did use it in Henderson, didn't they?
Well, what you see in Henderson and what you see in Carson City is that you have, I knew this off the top of my head a couple weeks ago, but of the 12 special law cities, 6 have wards and 6 do not. And so of the cities with wards, 2 of them go ward only all the way through, and 2 of them are at large all the way through with a ward residency requirement.
Okay.
And then Reno and Sparks are ward only in the primary and at large in the general.
Hey, Mr. Lawson.
So what if we do nothing?
Well, if you do nothing, you, of course, run the risk of being challenged under this decision out of the Ninth Circuit that the electoral system we are using runs afoul of the Equal Protection Clause.
If we pick one way or the other, don't we run the same risk?
Well, I think that...
we pick ward only, don't we run the same risk we pick at large?
So to be totally clear, in my view, you have 2 choices, right? And that is you can go ward only in the primary and at large in the general, or under state law, the default setting that you would fall back on once something is struck from the charter is at large in the primary and at large in the general. I don't think that you have the ability to go ward only in the primary and ward only in the general today. I think that's a change that you'd need to seek from the legislature. That said, yes, I think you do run the risk of being challenged in either direction. The basis for the challenge, I think, is different depending on which direction you choose to go.
Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mayor. My understanding, too, is obviously it's in our charter, which can't be changed until the legislature meets, to do it as we do right now, the hybrid system. So our hands are kind of tied until the legislature meets a year from now, and we can make a charter change to our current method of doing it. Because this is all going through the court system, is there the possibility, if we keep it as we have right now, that we can look at changing that at the next legislature, whether it's at large, whatever we decide to do, that we could maintain what we're doing right now for this coming election, because this will not make it through the court system, and we'll be able to do it through a charter change in the legislature, which is really how the change should come legally. Shouldn't it come? I mean, that's the right way to do it, is through the correct channels, which would be charter change in the legislature. But we can't do that for a year.
If you want to go ward only in the primary and ward only in general, yes, you would have to wait for a legislative session. To speak more broadly to your point in terms of how long civil litigation takes, it hasn't been argued. The rehearing hasn't been argued in San Francisco. It's been briefed, I think, but not set for argument. So it will be argued, and then it will take some period of time for the Ninth Circuit to issue another decision. At that point, there's a 90-day period within which the losing party gets to determine whether or not they want to try to appeal it to the Supreme Court. And then Supreme Court practice is kind of a two-tiered system in that you have to petition for certiorari, which gets fully briefed, and then the court decides in secret whether or not they want to take it. If they do want to take it, it is then docketed, and it is briefed on the merits and set for argument. But by the time all of that happens, the Supreme Court will almost certainly be in recess for the summer. So I think I'm hard-pressed to believe that you have a decision on whether or not they're going to even take the case until next fall, and then it won't be argued until the spring of 2017 probably. And then they'll have a decision by the middle of June 2017, if that were the track it took.
So it could be overturned. I mean, they could decide that it is, in fact, the hybrid system is allowable, if it goes all the way through the court. We don't know for sure that they're going to uphold the lower court.
Right. We have no idea really what they're going to do. As I say, it's an interesting argument, and it's certainly one that it's not totally out of left field, but certainly I don't think it's a slam dunk.
Does it make any difference? You said Tucson was partisan, and our primaries are partisan, but our positions for city council and mayor are nonpartisan. Does that make any difference that that's different for us than it is for Tucson? Does that affect
it is
how they look at it?
My understanding that our primaries are nonpartisan.
They're not partisan.
And so, it's an
partisan.
interesting question in that the partisan nature of the Tucson electoral system is another layer of restriction in the primary beyond just geographic location. But the Ninth Circuit decision was specific as to the geographic location restriction violates the Equal Protection Clause, and so it applies more directly to our system.
Okay, well, what I meant by that is that because ours are nonpartisan offices, our offices, for us, is included on both the Republican and the Democratic primary ballots, where in Tucson, if theirs is partisan, only Democrats living in that ward could vote, or only Republicans could vote for that, where ours covers all party affiliations because it's a nonpartisan. So it's just a little bit different. Does that
It's a little bit different.
make any difference?
I think it's just another layer of restriction, right? The decision comes down, and what it says is that, of the 80,000 people or so that are registered to vote in the general election, in the primary, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or whatever party they identify with, only X percent of that 80,000 total electorate are able to participate in the primary. And so what the court said is that because these people are similarly situated, they're all allowed to participate in the general. And the court finds that the primary is it's part of the general electoral process. It's not a separate election. And so what they're saying is similarly situated people, being that these are people who vote in the general election, are being treated differently by the law. And on that basis, because it's a voting rights issue, the court applies strict scrutiny, and they say, hey, you can't do this. You can't treat people differently on the basis of geographic location.
Yeah,
So no, I don't think it makes much difference in our case.
Okay, one more question, if you don't mind, Mayor. So does the demographics of our city by ward present other issues as we look forward compared to other jurisdictions? The demographics and breakup of each of our wards affect looking at voting rights issues. Is that something, as we look forward at this, is that something we need to consider legally?
Yeah, I think that it is. That's the $64,000 question. When Councilman Lawson asked what the basis for a challenge in either direction would be, on the one hand, if you stay with the system that we have in place right now, you're subject to challenge under the equal protection argument. That is the law in the Ninth Circuit right now. That's what you're looking at when you look at the PIA v. City of Tucson case. On the other hand, if you go at large, the demographics of the city come into play in a major way under the Voting Rights Act. At-large election systems are the electoral processes that are most subject to being struck down, I think, by the Voting Rights Act. It's impossible to say at this juncture. Certainly we have data as it relates to the demographics of the city from the last census. That data was presented to the Charter Committee the last time it was convened. Certainly I think it would be presented again. Your question as to whether or not it makes a difference, the generalized answer is, of course it makes a difference. The specific answer in terms of whether or not we're going to lose a lawsuit because of it is much more difficult to respond to under the standards that a Voting Rights Act claim is required to be brought under, the way it's analyzed. I couldn't answer that question today, although, I think certainly you run the risk.
Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could go back to the LCB and legislation, right now LCB hasn't looked at this issue or hasn't opined on the issue at all, correct?
To my knowledge, they have not.
Okay. And the process of the charter, just touching a little bit on what Councilwoman Bybee, is that we are a charter city and we basically don't do any changes to the city that the charter says we're supposed to do without the charter change.
That is correct. The charter includes a provision that suggests that if something is found to be unconstitutional or otherwise illegal, it is struck from the charter and the remainder of the charter continues on. It further provides that city elections are conducted pursuant to state law unless the state law conflicts with the charter. And so that's what you have here. That's the situation you have here, where this charter spells out this ward-only primary versus the at-large general, and the section of state law that deals with city elections, the default setting under that portion of the Nevada revised statutes provides for an at-large primary and an at-large general. But by and large, in my view, it's because cities like Wells and Caliente are special law cities,
right,
and they don't have wards. And so a ward-only primary is not something that they're capable of doing.
My concern comes with the perception of, the gang of 63 at Carson City. And I want to bring back the only other time that I can, in my history, was a conflict, and it come back with the municipal courts where, they had documentation that, the court systems had said what they could do. They had Supreme Court, or Nevada Supreme Court says that this is what they can do, but nothing could really be done with that until the legislation says this charter can be changed to allow this type of thing to be happening. And, the legislation was very clear on that, and I don't know if that's deemed to be unconstitutional or how it changes. I'm much more comfortable considering it's still under appeal, and there's the Ninth District Court. I wouldn't put anything on them what they'll do or won't do. But my concern is showing up in 2017 in Carson City. We've arbitrarily gone ahead and changed the Constitution, and then the legislators say, well, you don't have that responsibility, you don't have that right to do that. And you say, well, it's unconstitutional, so we're going to do it. And I think we start coming up where we're going to butt heads with the state legislation, and I think it would be much better to have a plan of attack to go down there and say, okay, this is the issue, we're in the court, how do we want to handle this thing? So Reno's doing it the same way, Sparks is doing it the same way, everybody's doing it the same way, and we don't arbitrarily do something that puts the gang 63 in a foul mood.
Mr. Smith, we don't have to worry about that. They're always in a foul.
Well, I'm just, I'm trying to do the best I can here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Doug, if we don't do anything today, if we keep it the same, it's ward only in the primary and then at large for the general election. If we changed it, we would change it to, one of the possibilities would be to at large for both elections, but you still had to live in the ward to run for Ward 3 or 2, whatever it happens to be.
That's correct.
Okay, so, and today, we can't really do anything except make a recommendation to the Charter Committee, because they're the ones that changes it at the legislature. Is that true?
No, well, yes and no.
I mean, we could vote to keep the same or change it, but it's still got to go to the Charter Committee.
If you wanted to go to the at-large state default system, I think that you could do that today. You could say, you know, we're much more comfortable in light of the decision from the Ninth Circuit, falling back on the provision of the charter that strikes sections that are unconstitutional or illegal and using the state law section. But if you wanted to change it to ward only, the reason that's not an option is because it requires a legislative change. That it is my understanding, Councilman Schmidt, that they actually have been receptive to that and it's been vetoed.
So either way, if we change it any other way than what we have now, including what we have now, or keep it the same, we're subject, we can be brought up.
Yes.
That they could sue us for it, and we just go with whatever happens.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Ms. Ratty, you have anything?
I do. Thank you for checking in. I think
Either
that, it's my opinion that it's only a matter of time before we see a Voting Rights Act potential violation. And so I think that the long-term goal is to get to ward-only voting. That's my personal opinion. But given the circumstances that we have before us today, understanding that state law and its current form only allows at-large, and that there's not a great argument, legal or otherwise, for going in that direction, I say we don't act, and as Councilman Smith pointed out, it's up to the Charter Committee to work on a longer-term answer for the committee. But my preference would be word only. And that's because I do think we'll see a Voting Act rights violation at some point. I just don't think we can get there today.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything for a motion? Mr. Smith?
Okay, I move to keep the elections the same as we have it now.
Mr. Schmidt?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Schmidt, to leave the voting the way it is now. Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Given that we're sort of in a judicial gray area, I'm wondering if the best sort of action is actually to take no action.
I'm going to agree with that.
Mr. Thornley?
I think that's a fine proposed solution given the apparent direction of the council.
So it's the same anyway, if we take no action?
Yeah.
That's correct.
No. Just withdraw the second? Okay, so.
And I'll withdraw and make a new motion.
Or it can just die for lack of
Yeah, we'll
motion.
just let it go. So, all right, so is there a motion to do anything? Not seeing one, we'll just let it go like it is, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug, appreciate it. Is that okay with you, Julia?
That's fine. I think that's the best way to go.
Okay, 9.3 is the first reading.
This is a first reading of Bill Number 2702, an ordinance providing for the conducting and holding of a primary and general election to be held in the city of Sparks on the 14th day of June, 2016, and the 8th day of November, 2016, respectively, providing filing fees and providing other matters properly related thereto.
This is the first reading of Bill Number 2702. The public hearing and second reading of this bill will be conducted at the regular City Council meeting on Monday, February 22nd, 2016. Okay, moving on. Public hearing and action items. 10.1, public hearing, consideration and possible approval of Bill Number 2701, an ordinance designated by the short title 2016 Medium-Term Flood Control Bond Ordinance providing for the issuance of City of Sparks General Obligation Medium-Term Flood Control Bond Series 2016 in the aggregate total amount of $20 million. Go ahead there,
That's the short
Mr.
title.
Finance Director. Yeah, it's a short version.
Good afternoon, Jeff Kronk, Financial Services Director for the record. What I have before you is a public hearing and agenda item to pass the ordinance, what should be the last action that we need to do to sell the bonds that would finance the finishing of the North Truckee Drain project. We came to you, before you in December to get initial authorization, so this would be the final authorization. The way this ordinance is worded, we're looking to pass this as if an emergency exists. What that means is that it's really beneficial just for the purposes of how the bond transaction works in order to avoid having to come before you one more time and put the potential bond investors, the timing gets tricky if we do it that way. So this is just really for administrative ease to do it this way. Based on approval today, we would move forward with an estimated bond sale as of February 18th, so here in a week and a half or so. Right now, we're looking at the way the ordinance is written is that these bonds would not exceed $20 million. Again, we do that for financial flexibility in order to get the final number in there. But what we're looking for based on community services input on the actual project is that we need approximately $19 million of funds to finish the estimated $27 million project. So we're looking to, based on what we know right now, we're looking to issue bonds at a par of $18.8 million. That should come in with a premium. But again, the final number will shake out the actual day of the sale once we get the bids. So this is a public bid process. These are general obligation bonds, but the debt service will be paid for with the flood fee that City of Sparks sewer service customers pay currently. And I think with that,
Rate?
I'm ready. I'm sorry?
It's the rate?
The rate, we don't know yet. We won't know until we actually get the bids. But what we're expecting right now is, right now, actually, I think it's going to be lower than what we have in the staff report. But at the time we did the staff report, we were looking at about a 2.05% interest rate. If you include all the issuance costs, about a 2.5% true or total interest cost rate is what we're looking at. Since we've done the report, the markets are kind of exploding on us, or maybe imploding. That might be a better way to put it. Yields have really dropped since just we even wrote this report. We won't know again, but right now investors are looking for safety. Even today, gold spiked up and the Treasury yields went significantly down. Right now, the 10-year yield is about 1.75% today. So, that would be less than our 10-year bond that we're proposing, which is what a medium-term bond is, and our estimate at 2%. So there's a lot of things in the market right now that are pointing to a lower interest rate. Ask me in 10 days, might be a completely different story. Yeah. So with that, I'll take questions.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, thank you to you and your staff and Neil and his staff for moving this thing right along. I think we're on our time frame that you guys promised the council for it, and I appreciate you guys on out there moving this thing quickly. Couple questions just to this has the transferability issue to it that I think everybody's concerned about is if the flood control people take it over, it transfers over to no cost to the City of Sparks. They take our money as well as our bond payment.
No, not the way this is written.
Okay.
However, that's certainly something that can be entertained at that time. This is issued as a general obligation, similar to what our regular sewer bonds are. So it's a general obligation of the city, even though we're going to have a very specific revenue source to pay that. So I think at that time we would have to figure out how to do that if that's the way to go. There's lots of ways to do that, though, whether you're transferring the debt or you keep the debt on City of Sparks and just retain the ability to keep issuing the proposed or the current fee. I mean, the idea, though, with this bond is that we're searching for we're actually going to be requiring an early call provision, which means that we can redeem this bond at no earlier than 5 years. So, and just doing a back of the napkin analysis, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to pay this off in 6 to 7 years at the most.
I agree. So we can then take at this with Turbo if flood comes on out of this thing and they actually do it, they can go ahead and just rewrite a new bond and pay this one off without penalty.
There's lots of ways we can get that done.
So there's options on it there.
Yes.
Give us the money.
And, I'm very, very supportive of this, and I want to make sure that folks out there know why we're doing this. We're only 10 months away from a 20-year ago event that devastated this city, a tune of $600 million in flood. And I'm not willing to sit down and wait for ballot measures and everything else like that to get this project finished. I think it's imperative the city of Sparks move forward and get this thing done. And I think that with the ability to pay it off in 6 to 7 years, we may have this paid off before the flood control actually takes on over. So I support it. Nothing against the flood control chair or anything else like that. There's a lot of headwinds out there.
Okay, Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question. So the bond closing would be in March, and we'd have the funds available at that time?
Yes, that's anticipated as early escrow. That's what we
Okay.
anticipate.
And the time frame, I know that's separate from the fiscal side of it, but the time frame on the project is?
I will turn that over to our Community Services Department. I see Mr. Hummel walking up here now, the man with all the answers.
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, Councilman Bybee, Andy Hummel, Utility Manager, for the record. We are currently acquiring the properties. We have 2 remaining easements to get, finishing up the bid package now so that we're ready to go.
What's the time frame?
And time frame for completion that your target?
We're looking to have that bid package ready end of March.
How long before he's done
Before
with
the
the
whole
project?
thing's finished?
For the time frame for the contractor, we're looking at an 18-month construction period. We looked at 12 months with the last one. They were quicker than that, but got some other challenges this phase.
Okay, thank you.
Well, seeing we're going to have a turbo payoff, we need a turbo get this thing done. So, all right, this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience like to speak to this particular item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to council for action. Ms. Ratty, do you have any comments, questions?
No, I thought everybody else's questions were good.
Okay. Looking for a motion, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve Bill number 2701, authorizing the issuance of medium-term obligations up to $20 million to provide for financing of flood control and drainage projects.
Mr. Smith?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schmidt, seconded by Mr. Smith to approve 10.1, approval of Bill number 2701, $20 million bond for a flood control project. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote or say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thanks, Jeff. And I want everybody out there to know the city of Sparks is the only one that's actually doing something for the flood control project, and we're doing it on our own dime mostly. The other entities haven't figured it out yet, but hopefully they'll come to the table here and we'll get something done for a real flood project for the whole area. So, okay, closed door session, Steve.
No, sir.
Thank you. Comments from the public? Anyone in the public, please? Comments, city council or city manager? Ms. Ratty, have anything?
Nope.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to go back. We had a retreat a couple months ago, and we looked at our strengths and weaknesses. And in the retreat, I believe we talked about consolidation, and we were looking at doing a reconfirm of our consolidation thing with the council and vote on it here at the council. And I haven't seen that come forward yet. Are we going to be doing that still for the public vote, or where we stood on consolidation issues?
Yeah, I think you can ask to have it put on the agenda, Ron.
Yeah, if we can get it on the agenda to talk about it, I think that would be great. And the other item I have, and I owe the council an apology because I wasn't aware that this, you learn something new every day in this job. I had, a few weeks ago, I had asked for a legal opinion on some legislation that was happening over in Washoe County. And I was not aware of that when I asked for a legal opinion on policy matters, that it was a private matter, that was not disseminated to the rest of the council. And so I apologize for that. Now, I'd like to have a policy discussion for this council on items that I've always thought that every item that brought forward us, the city attorneys reviewed and could make comments on. I want to make sure that we all understand what's what stays confidential in the city attorney's office and what, because I was expecting that information. I even wrote Ms. Bybee an email saying I thought it was available to the public. I didn't know that it was confidential to me for asking that. It was never intended, and I apologize if anybody saw that. It was never intended to be a personal matter. And I'd like to have some guidance through the city attorney's office and the city manager's office on when we ask for something, what should we expect to be held confidential in the city attorney's office and what we expect to be sent out to everybody, to the rest of the council, because on policy decisions, I never want anything to be confidential for me. I want it to be everybody knows what's going on.
Councilman Schmidt, I'll assume responsibility for that. I should have handed this out to the entire city council and put it on my website. Anything that is non-confidential, I usually put it on the Smart City Attorney's website. It was an oversight on my part. I should have passed it out just to make sure that everybody had received it. So I'll as far as the policy goes, from here on out, it's a non-confidential matter. I will pass it out to the city council. If it's in fact a confidential matter concerning, say, liability or something that's facing the city, I'll note it as confidential. I'll still pass it out to the respective city council members. And if it's specific to a particular council member, say, do I have a conflict of interest? Should I vote on this? Should I not vote on this? Then I will go ahead and give that to the individual council member protected by the attorney-client privilege.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further business, we're adjourned.